Being a Verizon engineer is about doing things right, and there's no shortcut to the right way.
So when we launched the world's first 5G network in September of 2018, we did it right. We started at Mobile World Congress Americas. A few weeks later, we brought the first 5G home ultra-fast internet to customers' homes.
Once you try the product, you're not going to go somewhere else.
Hi! Hi! Hans!
Emily.
You don't know how excited I am.
Okay.
There goes. That's really good.
We even built experiences to show potential customers the unprecedented speed of 5G home.
I expected it to be like a TV screen, but instead it looked realistic. I felt like I was sitting there.
But we didn't just set out to be the first to 5G. We wanted to be the best. We invited developers to build on our platform.
We can give you up to $1 million of seed money if you have a good idea. We have 8 capabilities in 5G. I call them currencies.
And partnered with some of the world's best brands to bring the potential of 5G to life. Then we put out a clear message telling the world how we're building 5G right. We're building the most powerful 5G experience for America, ushering in the 4th industrial revolution. Our vision for 5G is world-changing, and we're just getting started.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a panel of leaders whose work embodies innovation in technology, mission, and service. Welcome to the stage, Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes, City of Las Vegas Director of Information Technology Michael Sherwood, and Chief Information Officer, U.S. Department of Labor Gundeep Ahluwalia, and discussion moderator, Verizon Public Sector Product Development Director Nick Nilan.
Good to see you. Thank you. Hey guys.
The joke's on all of you. He's back.
He's back.
Round two for Gundeep. Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for our talk on 5G. I'm really looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to this since we started, and I spent some time down the street at CES. So I want to start with a quote, and then I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. The quote, "Secure 5G networks will absolutely be a vital link to America's prosperity and national security in the 21st century. 5G will be as much as 100 times faster than the current 4G cellular networks. It will transform the way our citizens work, learn, communicate, and travel. It will make American farms more productive, American manufacturing more competitive, and American healthcare better and more accessible." That was not the Verizon marketing department. That was not my CEO. That was actually President Trump in remarks at the Rose Garden back in April last year. And so really it showcases the importance of this technology, not just on the technology providers, not just on government, but everybody in this country. The pervasive nature that's coming with 5G is going to impact everything we do in the future. And it's really going to usher in what a lot of people are calling the 4th industrial revolution. It's going to impact everything we do. And so that's what I want to set as the baseline for our conversation today, real high level. And from there, we can get into the conversation around what does it actually mean for our governments and our citizens. And so let's start with some introductions. Gundeep, I think the whole audience knows you already, but we're going to go down the line and we'll do some introductions of who you are, your title, your background, what do you do? And then what I want to throw in there is, what are you passionate about? It's enough to have a job in public service to manage the day-to-day, and we thank you very much for doing that. But it takes a certain level of passion to think about the future and what it's going to do to your agency, your department, or your area of responsibility. And so that's really what I want to dive into today. So Gundeep, why don't you start there?
So I'm Gundeep. I have a 5-minute introduction. You guys will have to suffer through it. No. So at the Department of Labor, I think what excites me the most is the citizen-facing services that we provide, right? So the biggest passion for me is to do it faster, more efficient, and make sure that we are either at par with the commercial services that people are used to, or better. Right? So I think this is often, I talk to my team about some of our websites will say this works only on Internet Explorer, and that is the kind of experience that currently people are used to. So what motivates me the most is that, right? Improving that citizen experience and making sure that we are doing our job better, faster, more efficient, and at par or better than our counterparts in the commercial sector.
I love that. I absolutely love it. Thank you. Michael, why don't you go next? A little introduction, and then tell us what you're passionate about.
Sure. So I'm Michael Sherwood. I'm the director of, or I changed my title. The mayor always gets mad. Chief Information Officer for the city of Las Vegas. Really, what makes me passionate is getting up every morning and getting to live and work in such a fabulous city. And thank all of you for being here. In our city, and my pension fund will appreciate you as you continue to spend while you're here. But really the serious things are with our city, and what we're really passionate about is building community to make life better. And all of us live in a region where we have great amenities, whether it's great schools, great restaurants, great transportation options. My job is really to use those types. How does technology impact the citizenry, impact visitors, and make life better for them within our community? And that's really the heart of it. Everything from education to wellness and everything in between. It's really about leveraging technology, not just for technology's sake, but to make impact and impactful things for people that live in our community.
I love that, not including technology for technology's sake. And thank you so much for being such a fantastic host city for CES once again.
Thank you.
Sean?
My name is Sean Reyes. I am the co-producer and host of an A&E show called Addiction Unplugged, about the opioid epidemic and how that's ravaging and devastating our nation. More Americans dying from that than on an annual basis, even breast cancer, more in a single year than we lost in the entire Vietnam conflict. So something that I feel passionate about because it's affected so many people that I care about. On the weekends, I am an undercover covert operator, been in many countries, posed as a child sex buyer to infiltrate cartels and help local law enforcement and federal law enforcement in different countries take down child sex traffickers. What most people don't realize is there are 40 to 50 million modern-day slaves, including those who are trafficked for sex exploitation, but also labor, organ harvesting, illegal adoptions, conscription. And so when you talk about passionate, that's one of the things I'm most passionate about, helping wake up the world, that we have this incredible evil amongst us, and that the vast majority of us in America don't realize it. My 80-hour-a-week job is I'm the Attorney General for the state of Utah, and before that I was running a tech venture fund. I was a general counsel for a tech company, and in 15 years represented tech companies as outside and trial counsel. And so I come from a very tech-oriented background, and one of the things that I'm passionate about is being able to use the platform as in law enforcement and policy influencer at the state level to protect citizens from abuses that certainly exist with technology, but more importantly, to empower citizens, government, and NGOs, the education community, with solutions to fight these kinds of threats, like human trafficking, or public health crises, like the opioid epidemic, and to wake up every day and be able to believe that together, if we figure out ways to collaborate even more and more efficiently, which 5G will indefinitely help us do, that we can solve some of these really big issues, because they're not Republican issues or Democrat issues, they're human issues, and we need everybody really sort of working together on those. And thank goodness with 5G, when it comes as we expect it will, I think I will just say amen to the introduction. I think it will be revolutionary that way.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. That was incredibly impactful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
So I'm Nick Nilan. I lead product development at Verizon, and what I'm passionate about is bridging the digital divide. And we can think about that so many different ways. Is how do I get network technologies out to more folks in more places around our country, our inner cities and our rural locations. But then also it's about technology and digital literacy. How do we all start from a basis of truth in what we're talking about, and not thinking that we know what the technology is, but actually knowing what the technology is, and then building from there. So I wanted to start with three things, and then I'll get into the question. So 3 myths that are often misinterpreted with 5G. One, 5G is going to replace all former wireless technologies, and you don't have to worry about 3G or 4G. 3G's been around since 2003. It will fade out sometime around next year. And 4G was just created in 2010. It'll be around till at least 2027. So what we have to think about is not just a brand new network, but how do these networks work together along with Wi-Fi and other solutions out there? So one, 5G is not going to replace everything. It's going to be another technology that we have to think about and think differently about. The second is 5G is not a marketing term. We have to think about what does 5G actually mean. 5G is defined by 3GPP, an international standards body. And it means that it is actually based in non-standalone new radio technology on release 15. It's a little geeky, apologize. But it's important to understand that this is an international agreement. If we say 5G here in the United States, it's 5G in South Korea, it's 5G around the world. And all of these networks have to work together. And so that's number two. Number three is what does it do? And so I want to start with, from the 3GPP documents into commercial world, once we implement this, what are the 8 things that 5G will do uniquely that other networks really won't? And so let that form the basis of some of the conversations. So those are bandwidth over 10 or up to 10 gigabits per second, latency under 10 milliseconds. That's how the ping rates are between your device and the network. Service deployment, so getting a network out there, a small cell out there in under 90 minutes. Mobility, so being able to connect to a device that's traveling 500 kilometers an hour, high-speed trains, drones, et cetera. Energy use 90% less than 4G per bit. Data volume 10 terabits per second in a kilometer, in a square kilometer. Reliability of 5 nines on a wireless network. And devices, 1 million devices in a square kilometer. I thought it was important to start with what is 5G and what isn't it? And so if we start there from a common basis of truth and knowledge, I want to get into some of the questions to really understand how 5G is going to impact your agencies. And so the first question I have is, Gundeep, maybe we start with you. Explain how you see 5G supporting your agency's mission and accelerating your transformation plans.
So first of all, let me tell you that not many people in our agency understand what 5G is, right? So I feel like I'm going to steal your primer here and take it back and sort of educate people as to what it means.
Thank you.
So I see a lot of application across the department, right? But I also have learned that culturally you have to start slow, right? And it has to be, I'm pretty sure if I go to my program areas and say, we need to implement 5G, they'll look at me like, please get out of my office, and now, right? So instead, I think what the conversation, and this is what we are doing right now, is we have a huge project across the nation where we are trying to consolidate our 650 plus locations, which is something that is, I think, every federal, state, local agencies are trying to do as people are telework ready, people are remote. The need for real estate is dropping, right? And where you had 3 offices, you now only need 1. So we are actually right now in the pilot phase to think about cutting the cord. So when the estimates for that project came through, the biggest cost there was wiring in a building, right? So to rewire a building, make it, get the entire network to work. They were recarpeting my office the other day, and there was this thick a set of cables underneath the carpet, right? So I said, you shall not lay one more. You need to clean this up before. He said, can you stay out of the office for a month? Because we'll have to figure out which one to cut, right? So that's so we really want to use 5G to cut the cord. One, because it makes sense, but it is an undertaking where we have to do the testing to understand how these various networks coexist.
Sure.
How do we upgrade our Wi-Fi? Well, the VoIP phones that we were all excited about, well, guess what? They won't work either without wire. So now you have to figure out how they connect into the 5G network. But we are very excited to bake those pilots into a project that is of value to the secretary and is of long-term value to the organization, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's where we are starting. And once we have some confidence there and the business community gets behind it and 5G is better understood, we have several other areas that, in my mind, we could implement. And I'll give you one example. it is rare that we have if we have a bridge collapse in one place, we have the right OSHA investigator in the same city, right? So telepresence, for example, would be one great way for us to do mission delivery better, right? I mean, I have this thinking that one day we will have a bridge collapse, maybe we have the right resources over there or not, or in another part of the country, but you just take out your iPhone and the other person can step into the scene of the accident, right? And that's where most of our enforcement and that kind of activities that the Department of Labor is engaged in. And then there are tons of other possibilities. Those of us who are from Washington, D.C., if you go to the National Harbor, there is a autonomous vehicle that runs over there. It's called Ollie. So, our office, the Department of Labor, transportation, and the private sector sort of came together to make that 3D printed autonomous vehicle that is servicing the National Harbor area these days, right? So those are the kind of possibilities that 5G is going to open up for us at the Department of Labor.
That's awesome. Very cool. Michael, what about you? What do you see as the mission impacts of 5G?
Well, really, it's about flexibility and agility. When you look at a municipal agency, you think about how capital intensive it is today to bring network services to every intersection so we can provide different types of services. Those of you who have been here in town for a while have probably seen BMWs driving around with the word active on them. Those are autonomous vehicles that currently talk to our infrastructure. In order to make that infrastructure work, a capital intensive endeavor to bring fiber and services out to those intersections so we can actually make the connections to the vehicles and provide it back to a centralized system. 5G really takes us from a capital intensive process, or CapEx, to an OpEx. We'll really be able to increase our time to delivery. It's about speed to market in a lot of ways. We'll be able to put up sensors and systems in probably 75% faster or sooner into the infrastructure than traditional means of having to wait a year or two to pull fiber, get the right permits and so forth. The agility and the speed, and then the ability to do analytics, because you have the performance of the network at the edge, will really change the dynamics of just traffic control. It's just one small piece we're looking at, but it will really allow us to make vital changes and allow us to control our financial flexibility going forward.
That's fantastic. V2X communications already, that's impressive. General, how about you?
Well, let me give you my analogy, first of all, for what 5G reminds me of. And this is the disclaimer. I'm an uber geek. I speak at a lot of Comic-Cons. I'm wearing Star Wars Mandalorian socks. But 5G to me is like the Force. So I don't know if you'll take that, you in mobile telecom, but that's, to me, a positive thing. The Force you can understand conceptually, but unless you can actually master it and use it, it doesn't really do you any good. So right now we know by the statistics that you've enumerated how impressive and how disruptive 5G will be. Until we actually have that latency and that bandwidth, it's still conceptual, and we're still, sort of pod one learners. We're not Jedis yet with the Force. But when it does come, its ability to amplify everything, the connectivity of IoT, AV and VR, UAVs and drones, smart cities. I guess from my office's standpoint, our mission is so broad because we represent legally every facet of government. I see so many potential positive use cases and applications from roads and utilities and traffic to tax and tax filings to the National Guard and military. So if you're looking at national defense, cybersecurity, the ability for government workers to fulfill their mission, which is what Gundeep was talking about, the citizen interaction with government, which I think is maybe the most exciting part about that. And then again, the smart city, smart court, smart military base concepts. Everything will be amplified by orders of magnitude. And I'd like to give just one example concrete from our state where we have seen this already start to change the paradigm for how we do things. And we're only waiting now for 5G to be able to take us even to the next level. So we have partnered with an organization, a company called Banjo, that some of you might know. I think they may have a representative here. This is not a commercial for Banjo, by the way. I don't own any stock. I'm not on their board. I don't get anything, not even a T-shirt from the CEO. But they've been an amazing partner because they aggregate billions of points of data through millions of different sources in a way that's very protective of civil liberties. They don't, in their ecosystem, they won't intake anything, any PII. So privacy concerns are almost entirely mitigated. But what they are able to do is give us in almost real time a vision of what is going on everywhere in the state. And when we have children that are abducted, instead of hoping, praying, and knocking on doors, and the chief would know this well, this is how we do it in law enforcement. It's the best that we have. It hasn't changed for decades or generations, but we just send everybody out and hope and pray and do our best with the skills that we have. What this does is tell us within seconds, minutes at most, where the abducted child is, who the abductor was, not necessarily by their name, but where they're at, and we can figure all that out. So it's changed the entire game for us and how we do law enforcement on just that one tiny application of abducted children. When you're talking, if it's your child that's lost, imagine every second is critical in trying to recover that child and the chances of our success of keeping them alive before they're human trafficked or murdered or taken somewhere else out of jurisdiction. And what 5G will do is give us ever more ability in a nanosecond to be able to pinpoint where they're at and get to them. The other thing, since I brought it up and I'm really passionate about, on the opioid front, one of the things that Banjo has helped us be able to do is see in real time a heat map of where the pressure points are. Instead of waiting for people to die in our state of opioid overdoses and then doing retrospective studies, looking back 2 years or 3 years and how they got there, we're able to see right now the drivers towards what will kill them and interdict or intervene before it happens. One of those is being able to get them into beds for recovery and treatment that exist, but since so many agencies are not communicating and talking to each other, there's not an efficient way to get them there. And now, instead of taking them to jail and having law enforcement try to deal with their recovery, not a high rate of success, law enforcement instead is able to use Banjo, locate the bed immediately, get them there with a health and behavioral health, mental health expert, meet them there and help them in the recovery process. And so the reason I bring that up is because 5G will accelerate that and almost, again, using the Force analogy, in an almost miraculous, unbelievable way. And certainly we can talk about the downsides and the dangers of having that Force ability, because using the Star Wars paradigm, it can be used for evil also. But staying positive right now, I think that's one concrete example from the state of Utah that we're extremely excited about, our partnership with Banjo and being able to process, if you imagine their AI, sifting through billions of points of data from sky satellites to Waze input from traffic to CCTVs and everything simultaneously. That's, I think, a really exciting proposition for us in Utah.
That's fantastic. That's incredibly exciting. And as a big fan of Baby Yoda, I appreciate your comments.
I had those socks on yesterday.
I was going to say that they're not the Baby Yoda, but it's still good. No, what I heard from each of you was the focus on service deployment, flexibility and agility. How quickly can I get a network out there? I heard about wireless offices that will focus on the bandwidth capabilities. And then I heard about latency capabilities. When you're pulling all of this data from video surveillance sources, from multiple IoT devices, how can I get those devices to talk to each other? Because I know one of their capabilities of the company you mentioned has the ability to connect dots that we can't always see, and having the AI parse through all of those different dots. But if they can do that at the edge with a 5G edge, with a MEC, a multi-axis edge compute, that can happen even quicker. So what I heard was use cases and impact rooted in the technology that's going to be enabled. So I appreciate that. I want to take a little different spin on this, and we have a lot of companies here, a lot of government agencies here, and the question I always ask as someone from industry is, how can we better partner? What do you look for in industry to help you move forward with your ideas of how 5G can impact your agency? What can we do better in industry, and how can we work together to enable that vision that you have?
So a couple of things. First of all, every time I have interaction with local and state agencies, I am fascinated. You guys, in my mind, get a lot more done with a lot less and a lot quicker. So kudos to you. We sometimes in the federal government are a little bit slower on many counts. With regards to the partner community, I think we are fairly effectively utilizing our existing relationships to do pilots and slowly prove the technology and start bringing it in, right? Of course, I would like to bring it in sooner and faster. And so one thing that I think the partner communities can do is maybe team together and bring a solution to us. Very often, what I see is a partner will come in and they have capabilities in a certain part of the technology, but not the whole solution. And without a solution, it's just a tool, right? At the end of the day. So that is one thing that I would request the partner community to think about how to. And 5G is being so new, I think those partnerships are sort of formative at this point in time. So that is one thing that would be nice. On our side, I think we really have to think about our procurement strategies and how we are going to, because if we have to increase the speed to get new technology where it is helping with certain mission areas, we have to develop innovative ways to buy things, right? And how will I ever write a statement of work when I don't even understand 5G, right? And I think that is what the challenge is. So I think on our side, we have to sort of reform. And there are vehicles and there are provisions in the FAR that allow us to do things where we just tell you what the objective is, and you guys come back and say, here is how the private industry is doing it, and here is what the best of breed is, and here is how you can utilize it, right? So I think those are two things that would be vital, not only for 5G, in my opinion, all the new technologies that are barreling towards us at a very high speed.
I appreciate that. Michael, one of the things that Gundeep just talked about is partners coming together before they come to you and developing solutions together or working together with you, with him. You mentioned V2X as a strategy that you're looking at. That requires OEMs, vehicle OEMs. It requires sensor manufacturers. It requires a lot of coordination. How do you handle that partnership and all of those overwhelming people coming to you?
Well, I think you nailed it. I mean, the point is that, look, from our municipal government, we're not going to make the progress without the partnerships. It's just not going to be there. The most important part, though, is the solution and getting the different vendors to. We still struggle. I mean, we have some of this V2X out in the field today. We're doing more. We'll be launching some additional pilots coming up. Pilots with solutions providers are extremely important. Start small, grow over time. But I think the hardest part is just getting different companies to learn this is a new day. You can't do one source is going to cover everything. It's a multitude of companies coming together and bringing a solution together and realizing that everybody's going to get a little piece of the pie. It's not going to be just one pie for one individual. And that's been a challenge. It remains a challenge, and I don't think we're going to solve it anytime soon, and especially with the vehicle situations that we're working with now, with autonomous vehicles and some of the OEMs and different manufacturers, it's not always an easy process to get through. And it's something that's going to take more time, and I think more understanding and education. And the other part internally within our organization was brought up again is procurement. Government has to understand the need for changing some of its procurement practices. One, to still enable equality and fair and a transparent process, but also realize we can't do an RFP or write something that we necessarily don't understand quite yet, or to have this process equal a year to 2 years. People need change in certain areas today. We need to be able to bring solutions quicker to the marketplace in order to make impacts for the community.
So one of the things you mentioned earlier, General, is real-time data sharing, right? So how do you coordinate all these data points together? That's going to come from multiple different manufacturers, different companies, and government itself. How do you coordinate and facilitate data transfer while protecting, you mentioned earlier, privacy?
trying to get into the sort of really detailed strategy of coordinating amongst all those agencies in the private sector, I think we don't have enough time to get into. Let me give you a couple thumbnail points that I think would address that issue on a maybe little 20,000 foot scale. Regardless of what we do together, we may realize the potential, we may understand the technology, but two incredibly important constituencies often don't. Lawmakers, and I think we talked about this a little bit in our breakout yesterday, it's incumbent on us to not forget to educate them. You guys have, many of you, great government affairs teams, but in the process, sometimes we get so far ahead on the policy that we forget to bring them along. Secondly, the public. We can't assume that the consumers and the public will be as excited about all these things that we talk about unless we do a good job together helping to lay the groundwork with our PR teams and media teams in really getting that grassroots buy-in from the public. Again, you could have all the best statistics in the world from the Department of Health, unless the public understands that in a way that really moves them emotionally, it really impedes our ability to do the things that we want to do. A couple of other things that came to mind. One, regardless of the profitability, if your company has the ability to partner with us, please be open to that. Why? Because my view is I think government should largely stay out of the way of the private sector and try to do everything that it can to facilitate and empower the private sector. But if the private sector doesn't step up and help us solve some of these big, broad issues like the opioid epidemic or human trafficking, then guess what? Government, because they have noble people in government trying to do their best, will try to solve them by creating programs. And President Reagan had a great saying, there's no permanent entity than a temporary government program. So once it starts, it's going to keep growing and growing and growing. It's hard to get rid of. And so if it's beneficial to the private sector to have us as government stay out of your way on certain things, then we need your help on helping to solve some of these bigger issues. And many of you have those capabilities. And again, it may not pencil entirely, but we need your help on that, even if it's a loss leader, even if it's just for the humanitarian side of it, even if it's just for your workforce to feel better about who they are and what your organization represents. Because if you don't step up and do that, we're going to try to do it as government, and we'll be less efficient about it. And in the long run, I'm worried that we'll create more impediments to innovation and the things that you're trying to do. So I don't know if that addressed the questions that you were getting at. It's very difficult to get agencies to share and work together legally, politically, PR-wise, and we have to educate the public because their trust level is pretty low with the government. And please don't forget the rural communities. Since we're talking about 5G, that will be the great equalizer for many of the communities that I love that have been left behind economically, but being able to empower them to have more remote workforces. So again, it may not be immediately impactful from a profitability standpoint, but please don't leave those great communities behind in the rural sector.
No, I definitely appreciate the comments specifically on the technology education, both for our citizens that we're going to roll out these services to that want to connect to government services, but also for our elected officials. I think that's fantastic. That's a good point. We've got a couple minutes left, and I've got about 6 more questions to get through. But I'm going to open it up, see if anyone in the audience has questions, and we can start right here.
So will 5G eliminate the need for Wi-Fi and for wired?
I'm going to say no. It's going to be a combination of services. I think it just enhances. It depends on the business case and the use case and what you're going after. But I see Wi-Fi staying and improving in some ways as well.
So for us, both will stay, right? It has to be. We have to provide a level of redundancy in our offices for this office space project pilot that we are doing. So in fact, the Wi-Fi has to be upgraded to Wi-Fi 6 as well. So all those access points have to go. And what we are trying to do is make sure that 5G and Wi-Fi and what will work together for now. So I don't see it going away either.
No. Sometimes you need a lightsaber, sometimes you need a blaster.
Yeah, there we go.
Sticking with a theme.
Hang out
Yeah,
with you more
shameless.
often. I love these ideas.
Star Wars.
No, I love it.
I'm gonna go to my board and tell them this. Get the Force.
I don't know if I'm getting invited back. Don?
I'll invite you over. Don't worry. You're good.
Any other questions from the audience?
Can you tell us what a realistic time frame for the benefits of this? Is it a year, 2 years, is it 3 years?
I feel like that's the carrier question.
Yeah. See all the eyes?
Everyone's looking at me. Verizon launched 5G in 31 cities last year, and we have plans to expand that significantly over the next couple of years. You're going to see that continue to expand, especially as more spectrum is being used, right? So right now we're operating at the UWB, ultra-wideband millimeter wave spectrum, 28 and 39 gigahertz. As more spectrum opens up for sub-6, that'll allow expansion into additional locations. But we are putting a lot of money in fiber in the ground to backhaul all of the 5G millimeter wave small cells that are going out. And that will cover a significant amount of the country over the next few years. So it is going to be real, but in the meantime, we're still going to have 4G around for many years to come. And what we're going to see is additional uses of 5G in smaller areas too, right? So campuses, in building, competing or augmenting Wi-Fi. Sorry, question over here?
An extension of that same question. Is all 5G the same? I mean, if you look at, you talk about 5G,
Yeah.
what's AT&T's version of 5G? How do you break that out? How does
Yes.
5G the same?
Yeah, so the differentiators are really going to be whether or not it's built on the 3GPP standard. So if it's built on the 3GPP standard and you're using the new radio, it's all going to be essentially the same 5G. And it's a matter of what release you're on. So if release 15, eventually 16 and 17 are all being discussed right now, there's going to be different features that we enabled on different networks, but it's all going to be interoperable if you're all on 3GPP and R. Right, so we'll be able to have communications across networks just like we do today, and we'll be able to use manufacturing equipment from similar manufacturers. And so we're all using non-Chinese based equipment manufacturers, right? So Nokia, who's a great partner of ours and has been for many, many years, Samsung and Ericsson and others. And so as long as we're all using that 3GPP standard, it's all going to work together, and it's all, we'll call it 5G. The other differentiator is spectrum. So whether or not you're going to operate at 600 megahertz on the low end to get broad propagation but not as high speeds, or on all the way up to the millimeter wave, very high speeds and low latency but less propagation. So those are the two differences you're going to see as long as you're on the same standard.
There's more commercial market to provide these services. Where do you see the ethical boundary between either signing your so to speak, privacy rights away as a consumer, or the requirement for if you're at a traffic or other traffic issues to have a commercial boundary report what they're seeing in using this type of technology?
So it sounds like we're going to be getting a lot more data out of 5G. How do we use that appropriately is essentially the question without boiling it down too much. And I'm going to let whoever wants to jump in answer, and that's probably going to be our last question.
Well, it's a hard question to answer because the public doesn't even know the answer to that question. They claim to want to have privacy. They're also not willing to give up any of the accessibility of certain apps. And so for us, with policymakers or enforcers, we're really trying to hit a moving target. It's really hard to actually understand what the public wants. And so, I mean, it's a very difficult question to ask. I'll pose one back to you. As we put our own guardrails around AI as G7 nations and our allies, knowing full well that others who are in this race to 5G and AI are not concerned about those things, how much do we hamstring ourselves by putting those guardrails around, understanding that others are not? So I'll leave that thought with you along the way.
And I feel like I just won the Oscar, no? The music's going up.
I think we're being played off.
That means we have to go.
Yeah,
That means we have to go.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate everyone's engagement.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Pleasure to see you, Chief. Yeah, thanks.
Well done. Well done.